Okay, real talk. You know that moment at the end of the month where you open your bank account and you're genuinely surprised by how low the number is? Like, you did the math in your head. I make decent money. I don't buy crazy stuff. But somehow the balance is still giving you heart palpitations? Yeah, that was me. For years. And here's the thing that really messed with my head. I wasn't broke by any traditional definition. I had a job. I paid my bills on time. I even had a little bit in a savings account, but I wasn't building anything. Every month felt like I was on a treadmill, moving, but going nowhere. Then I stumbled across a journal, not some self-help book, an actual handwritten journal from a retired entrepreneur who'd gone from $17,000 in debt at 28 to a net worth north of $4 million by 52. A friend of mine found it in a box of donated items at an estate sale, of all places, and thought of me. And what was in that journal wasn't what I expected. It wasn't stock tips. It wasn't wake up at 4 a.m. and grind. It was habits, tiny, almost embarrassingly small daily habits around money. So I did something a little ridiculous. I decided to copy every single one of them for 30 days straight. And what happened over those 30 days genuinely changed the way I think about money forever. My name is Bahari, and I spend way too much time thinking about the psychology of wealth, specifically why some people seem to accumulate money almost effortlessly while the rest of us feel like we're constantly swimming against the current. If you're someone who makes a reasonable income but somehow never seems to get ahead, if you feel like you should have more saved by now, but the math just doesn't seem to add up, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today I'm going to walk you through all 30 days of this experiment, the 7 core habits I identified from that journal, and, more importantly, the psychological rewiring that happens when you actually practice them consistently. This isn't about budgeting apps. This isn't a hustle culture sermon. This is about understanding the invisible mental frameworks that separate people who build lasting wealth from people who stay stuck. All right, let's get into it. So, let me give you a little more context about this journal. The man who wrote it, I'm going to call him the architect, because that's honestly the word that kept coming to mind as I read his entries. He wasn't some tech billionaire. He wasn't born rich. He grew up in a working-class household in the Midwest, started a small construction and renovation business in his early 30s, and over about 20 years, turned it into something genuinely substantial. But the journal wasn't about business strategy. It was almost entirely about his relationship with money on a day-to-day level, the decisions he made when no one was watching, the way he talked to himself about purchases, about income, about the future. And here's the first thing that hit me. On the very first page, written at the top in capital letters, was this sentence: "Wealth is not about income. Wealth is about the gap between what comes in and what disappears." Now, I know you've probably heard versions of this before. Spend less than you earn. Sure, but the way he thought about it was different. He didn't think about spending as the enemy. He thought about unconscious spending as the enemy. And those are very different things. Here's what most people don't realize. According to research from the National Endowment for Financial Education, roughly 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck at some point, and a significant portion of those people have household incomes above $75,000 a year, above $100,000 a year even. So, income is clearly not the variable. The variable is something else. The architect had a phrase for it. He called it money, leaking through unconscious decisions. And his entire system was built around making the unconscious conscious. Okay, so let me break down the 7 habits, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened when I tried to implement each one. Day 1. The first habit in the journal was deceptively simple. Every single morning, before doing anything else, before checking email, before social media, before even making coffee, the architect would spend exactly 1 minute looking at his financial position, not analyzing it, not stressing about it, just looking at it. He'd check his primary checking account balance, his savings balance, and, once he had them, his investment accounts. That was it. 1 minute, every single day. Now, when I tell people this, I usually get one of two reactions. Either, that sounds like it would give me anxiety, or that sounds too simple to matter. And both of those reactions are actually really telling. Let me address the anxiety response first, because this is where it gets psychologically interesting. Most of us have what researchers call financial avoidance. We don't look at our bank accounts regularly because the information is uncomfortable. And here's the cruel irony of that behavior. By not looking, by not knowing, we actually make worse decisions. We spend on autopilot. We forget about subscriptions. We underestimate how much we've spent on food delivery this week. There's a concept in behavioral economics called the ostrich effect, named after the myth of ostriches burying their heads in the sand. Studies from the Swedish Institute for Financial Research found that investors actually log into their accounts less frequently when markets are declining. They look away from bad information even when looking would help them respond to it. And this isn't just about investing. This is about everyday spending too. The moment you look at your balance every morning, consistently, calmly, without judgment, something shifts. Money stops being this vague, abstract, slightly scary thing and starts being data. And data you can work with. By day 3 of my experiment, I noticed something I genuinely didn't expect. I started making different micro decisions throughout the day. I'd go to order something on DoorDash, and I'd have this instant recall of the number I'd seen that morning. My brain was doing math it never used to do, not because I was trying to budget, just because the information was present. Here's the math that makes this habit powerful. The average American makes somewhere around 35,000 decisions per day, according to researchers at Cornell. Obviously, not all of those are financial, but a meaningful chunk of them are. Studies suggest that the average person makes roughly 200 discretionary spending decisions per month. Coffee, snacks, apps, impulse buys, convenience upgrades. If the morning financial minute makes you rethink even 10% of those decisions, just 20 of them per month, and those 20 decisions represent an average of $8 each, that's $160 a month, $1,920 a year, just from looking at a number every morning. That's not a budget, that's awareness. Okay, now, here's one you've definitely heard before, and I want to challenge the way you probably think about it. Habit number 2 from the Architect's Journal was the 24-hour rule. Before making any unplanned purchase over $50, he would wait 24 hours. Bihari, that's so basic. I know. Just stay with me, because most people who try this rule implement it as a willpower exercise. Like, I want to buy this thing, but I'm going to suffer through not buying it for 24 hours. And if you approach it that way, it doesn't really work long term, because willpower is a finite resource. There's decades of research on ego depletion confirming this. The architect's version was different. He didn't use the 24 hours to resist the purchase. He used the 24 hours to get curious about it. Specifically, he had 3 questions he'd write down in a small notebook whenever the urge to buy something arose. 1. What am I actually feeling right now? 2. Will this purchase change anything important in my life a week from now? 3. Am I buying the thing, or am I buying the feeling the thing represents? That third question is the one that wrecked me, because when I started applying it honestly, I realized that most of my impulse purchases were never about the thing. They were about a feeling I was chasing. The $14 cocktail at the nice bar wasn't about the drink. It was about feeling like someone who belongs in a certain kind of life. The new tech gadget wasn't about the functionality. I already had something that worked perfectly. It was about feeling like I was on top of trends, sophisticated, ahead of the curve. Now you might be thinking, Okay, but people are allowed to enjoy things. Not every purchase has to be utilitarian. And you're right, totally right. The architect spent money on experiences and things he enjoyed. That wasn't the issue. The issue was unconscious spending, the habit of soothing emotional states through purchasing without ever recognizing that's what you're doing. Here's the number that should make you stop for a second. According to a 2023 survey by Slick Deals, the average American spends approximately $314 per month on impulse purchases. That's $3,768 a year. Over a decade, invested at a conservative 7% return in an index fund, that's roughly $52,000. $52,000? Not from some extreme sacrifice, from pausing, before buying things you didn't plan to buy. By the end of week 2 of my experiment, I'd only triggered the 24-hour rule about 8 times. 6 of those times, I didn't end up making the purchase. Not because I was depriving myself, but because when I answered those 3 questions honestly, the desire mostly evaporated on its own. 2 of those purchases I did make, and you know what? Those felt genuinely different, intentional, satisfying in a way that impulse buys almost never are. All right, this is where the architect's journal started getting into territory that flat out contradicted what most financial advice tells you. Habit 3. Pay yourself first. Again, I know, you've heard this. Set up automatic transfers to savings. Fine, we've heard the sermon, but here's the thing. The architect had a very specific philosophy about how much to pay yourself first, and it was rooted in a principle that genuinely surprised me. Most financial advice says to save 20% of your income, or 10% if you're getting started. The architect's rule was different. He called it the uncomfortable percentage. His definition: the uncomfortable percentage is the highest percentage you can save without it feeling so painful that you stop. And he was explicit. It should feel a little uncomfortable, not devastating, just slightly uncomfortable. Why? Because comfort is the enemy of progress. If saving 5% of your income doesn't make you adjust your lifestyle at all, you're not stretching. You're just moving money around, while your spending habits stay exactly the same. He wrote, "The uncomfortable percentage forces you to solve a problem you'd otherwise ignore. When money is missing from your accessible account, your brain gets creative about how to live on less. When money is present and accessible, your brain tells you everything is fine." This is backed by something called Parkinson's law of money. Money, like water, expands to fill whatever container holds it. If you have $4,000 in your checking account, you will spend like someone with $4,000 in their account. If you have $2,800, you'll spend like someone with $2,800. Now let me show you the math of why this habit, executed over time, is genuinely life-changing. Let's say you earn $60,000 a year. That's $5,000 a month gross, roughly $3,800. Take home after taxes and benefits in most scenarios. If you save 10% automatically, you're moving $380 a month into savings or investments. After 1 year, $4,560. After 10 years, at 7% average return, approximately $63,000. Not bad. Now let's say you push to 20%. That's $760 a month. After 1 year, $9,120. After 10 years at 7%, approximately $126,000. Now let's say you push to 25%. The architect's actual target. That's $950 a month. After 1 year, $11,400. After 10 years at 7%, approximately $158,000. The difference between saving 10% and 25% over a decade isn't just extra money. It's an entirely different financial life. The 10% person is hoping for security. The 25% person is building toward freedom. And here's the wrinkle that makes this habit genuinely transformative. When you automate the uncomfortable percentage, your lifestyle adjusts. Not all at once, not painfully, but over time. Your brain solves the problem. You find cheaper alternatives. You cut the subscriptions you weren't really using. You start cooking more. Not because you're disciplined, but because the constraint forces creativity. On day one, when I bumped my automatic savings transfer from my comfortable 12% up to 22%, I genuinely panicked a little bit. By day 30, I hadn't touched that extra money. My life had quietly reorganized itself around the smaller number. The architect called this letting scarcity be your teacher. And he was right. Okay, we're about halfway through the habits now, and this is the one that I think most people will resist the hardest, because it requires honesty with yourself that's genuinely uncomfortable. Every Sunday morning, always Sunday, he was specific about that, the architect would spend about 20 minutes doing what he called his financial autopsy of the previous week. He'd pull up his bank and credit card statements, look at every single transaction from the past 7 days, and categorize them. Not into a complex spreadsheet, just mentally into 2 buckets. Bucket 1, intentional spending, things he planned to spend on or things that clearly aligned with what he valued. Bucket 2, unconscious spending, things that happen by habit, convenience, impulse, or social pressure. He wasn't looking to eliminate bucket 2 entirely. He was looking to see it clearly. Here's what most people don't realize. We are catastrophically bad at estimating our own spending. There have been multiple studies on this. One frequently cited one from Kansas State University found that people underestimate their discretionary spending by an average of 40 to 50%. 40 to 50%. So if you feel like you're spending $800 a month on discretionary items, you're probably spending closer to $1,200. Maybe more. The weekly autopsy destroys that illusion. And once you see clearly, the pattern usually becomes obvious really fast. For me, day 7 of my experiment was humbling. I sat down, opened my bank app and credit card statement, and went through the past week. The thing that jumped out immediately was food. I knew I spent on food, but I had no idea how fragmented it was. Coffee here, lunch delivery there, a grocery run, another coffee, snacks from a convenience store, a dinner that I could have cooked. Over 7 days, I had spent $287 on food. My mental estimate going in was probably $180. Now, I'm not saying $287 on food in a week is inherently wrong. That's a personal call. But I hadn't decided to spend $287. It had just happened. Unconsciously. Across 20 or 30 little frictionless transactions that each felt small in the moment. The architect wrote something in his journal about this that I keep coming back to. The biggest enemy of financial progress is not bad luck or low income. It is the accumulation of small, invisible leaks that no one ever stops to count. After my first weekly autopsy, I didn't drastically change my behavior. I just became aware. And that awareness alone started to shift things. By week 3, my unconscious food spending had dropped by about $90 for that week. Not from white-knuckling it, just from seeing the pattern and naturally becoming more intentional. All right? This is the habit that I think is the most philosophically significant, and it's the one that took me the longest to internalize. Habit 5 from the Architect's Journal. Before making any major purchase, ask yourself whether you're buying an asset or a liability. Now, this sounds like a Robert Kiyosaki rich dad, poor dad concept, and I know some of you just rolled your eyes. Fair. The asset vs liability framework has been oversimplified into cliches so many times that it's lost its edge. But the architect's version had a specific nuance that made it click for me in a way it never had before. He said, the question isn't just, is this an asset or a liability? The question is, does my relationship with this purchase make me richer or poorer over time in money, in time, in freedom? Let me give you an example. A car. Most of us think of a car as a necessary expense, and it often is. But think about the difference between two car choices. Car A, a brand new $42,000 vehicle. You finance it at 5.9% over 60 months. Your payment is roughly $810 a month. Over 5 years, you'll pay approximately $48,600 plus insurance, which for a newer vehicle might run $180 a month, plus the fact that the car loses roughly 15 to 20% of its value in the first year. Car B, a certified pre-owned vehicle 2 to 3 years old, similar make. Cost, $26,000. You finance a smaller amount, or better yet, save aggressively for 6 months and pay a large chunk in cash. Monthly payment roughly $450 if financed at the same rate. Lower insurance premiums, and you're starting with a vehicle that's already absorbed that brutal first-year depreciation. The difference in monthly cost between those two choices, about $500 a month. Invested over 5 years at 7%, approximately $36,000. But here's the deeper point the architect was making. It's not just about cars. It's about developing a reflex, a mental habit of automatically asking, how does this decision compound over time? Because here's the thing about wealth building. Every financial decision you make today doesn't just affect today. It affects the compounding trajectory of your entire financial future. When you spend $1 today instead of investing it, you're not just spending $1. At 7% annual return over 30 years, you're spending $7.61. That's the real price of everything. So when the architect was considering buying a $3,000 piece of equipment for his business versus a $3,000 watch for his wrist, he wasn't comparing $3,000 to $3,000. He was comparing a depreciating vanity item to something that generated revenue. The watch was a $22,830 decision. The equipment was an investment. Now, I want to be careful here because I don't want this to become a never spend money on anything enjoyable argument. That's not what the architect was saying, and it's not what I'm saying. What he was saying was, know what you're buying. Be conscious about it. Don't accidentally buy $22,000 worth of depreciation because you thought you were just treating yourself. During my 30-day experiment, I found myself applying this lens to 3 significant decisions. 2 purchases I was considering and 1 subscription bundle I was thinking about upgrading. In each case, asking, how does this compound over time, didn't stop me from spending, but it changed the nature of the spending. I made different choices than I would have made unconsciously. This one caught me genuinely off guard because it's not what I expected to find in the journal of a self-made millionaire. Habit 6. Talk about money regularly and openly with people you trust. The architect had a small group. He called them his financial kitchen cabinet. 3 people who knew his actual financial situation, who he'd meet with or call at least twice a month. Not a formal meeting, just checking in, sharing, asking questions, being honest about mistakes. And here's what he wrote about why this was so important. Secrecy around money breeds shame. Shame breeds avoidance. Avoidance keeps you broke. The fastest way to improve your financial life is to make it visible. That hit differently. We live in a culture that is absolutely bizarre about money. We'll post our vacations on Instagram, talk about our relationships in detail, share our health struggles publicly, but the specific number in your bank account, the amount of debt you're carrying, your actual salary, that's somehow the last taboo, and research backs up the cost of this secrecy. A study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that people who discuss their financial decisions with a trusted peer make measurably better financial choices than people who keep their finances private. The act of having to verbalize a decision, knowing you might have to explain it to someone who will give you honest feedback, activates a different level of cognitive scrutiny. There's also something else going on here. Social norming. When you're surrounded by people who never talk about money, your own financial behaviors get silently calibrated to your peer group's visible signals. You see their cars, their vacations, their houses, but not their debt, not their savings rate, not their actual financial situation. You're essentially comparing your financial insides to everyone else's financial outsides and making decisions accordingly. Lifestyle inflation. Keeping up with appearances, it all flows from this. When you have even one or two people in your life with whom you can be financially honest, everything changes. You stop performing financial success and start building it. Day 15 of my experiment, I called my closest friend, someone I'd known for 12 years, and told him exactly where I was financially, my savings rate, my debts, my goals, my embarrassing mistakes. He did the same. It was one of the most uncomfortable and most valuable conversations I've ever had about money. We've talked every 2 weeks since then, and having that accountability has been worth more to me than any app or system. The last habit, and honestly the one that surprised me most because it was the most touchy-feely thing I'd ever encountered in a context like this. This was from a hard-nosed businessman, and it was a letter-writing exercise. Once a month, the architect would write a letter to his future self, specifically to himself 5 years in the future. He'd describe what that future self's financial life looked like, in detail, specific numbers, specific scenarios, not as a wishful thinking exercise, as a decision-making tool. Here's the psychology behind why this works, and it's genuinely fascinating. Researchers at NYU and Stanford have done studies on what they call future self-continuity, essentially how connected you feel to your future self. And they found that most people's brains treat their future self almost like a stranger. When you're making a decision between spending money on pleasure today versus saving it for retirement 30 years from now, your brain isn't processing that as me versus future me. It's processing it as me versus some random person I've never met. This is a huge part of why saving for the future is so psychologically difficult. You're essentially being asked to sacrifice for a stranger. But when you regularly imagine and articulate your future financial self in detail, in your own voice, the psychological distance shrinks. Your future self becomes more real, more connected to your present identity, and the decisions you make in the present start to reflect that. On day 29 of my experiment, I sat down and wrote my first future self letter. I described, in specific terms, what I wanted my financial life to look like at 45. The investment account value, the lack of debt, the freedom to take a month off if I wanted, the ability to handle an unexpected expense without it being a crisis. And then I described the specific daily behaviors of that future person, what they did with their morning financial minute, how they approached purchases, how much they saved automatically. Here's what hit me. The future person I described wasn't doing anything dramatically different from what I'd been doing for the past 29 days. The experiment had already started to become the identity. Okay, let's talk numbers because I know that's what you've been waiting for. 30 days, 7 habits. What actually changed? Financially, in terms of concrete dollars, my savings rate went from 12% to 22% of my take-home income. That's a meaningful increase, and it happened without me feeling like I was suffering. The automatic transfer just became the new baseline. My tracked weekly spending on unconscious purchases dropped by approximately $340 over the course of the month. That's from the combination of the 24-hour rule, The weekly autopsy and the morning financial check-in working together. They reinforce each other. I canceled 4 subscriptions I'd completely forgotten about. Combined cost, $67 per month. Annualized, $804 I was paying for nothing. I did not make 2 major purchases I'd been seriously considering before the experiment started. Combined, they would have cost about $2,800. After applying the 24-hour rule, the weekly autopsy, and the asset mindset framework to both of them, I decided neither aligned with what I was actually trying to build. Total financial impact of month 1, roughly $3,800 to $4,200 in changed behavior, depending on how you count it. Now, and this is important, I'm not saying you'll get identical results. Your situation is different from mine. Your income, your expenses, your existing habits, all of it is different. But here's what I want you to think about. If the behavioral changes from this 30-day experiment result in even a modest $300 to $400 per month in better financial decisions, which is conservative, and you redirect that into a low-cost index fund or your retirement account over 10 years at 7% annual return, approximately $50,000 to $67,000 over 20 years, approximately $158,000 to $211,000 over 30 years, approximately $364,000 to $486,000 from habits, not from getting a new job, not from winning the lottery, from changing the unconscious patterns around daily money decisions. That's the compounding of behavior. Here's what most people don't realize about everything I just walked you through. None of those 7 habits are actually about money. I know that sounds crazy in a video called I Copied a Millionaire's Daily Money Habits, but hear me out. The Morning Financial Minute is about attention, specifically the practice of placing your attention on things that matter before the noise of the day captures it. The 24-hour rule is about emotional regulation, learning to recognize when you're making a decision from an emotional state rather than a considered one. Paying yourself first at the uncomfortable percentage is about identity, deciding who you are before circumstance and convenience decide for you. The weekly autopsy is about honesty, the willingness to look clearly at your own behavior without judgment or excuse. The asset mindset is about time horizon, training yourself to think in compounding consequences rather than immediate sensations. Talking about money openly is about community and accountability, letting the people who care about you actually know where you are. And the future self-letter is about coherence, closing the gap between the person you want to be and the person you're being today. These are virtues, habits of character. The money piece is almost secondary. This is actually what the architects seem to understand better than almost anyone I've learned from, that wealth isn't primarily a financial phenomenon. It's a psychological one. There's a reason why a large percentage of lottery winners end up bankrupt within a few years. It's documented, it's studied, it's real. The money arrived, but the mental frameworks to handle it didn't. The habits of attention, discipline, honesty, community, and long-term thinking weren't there. Conversely, there's a reason why people who've lost everything, truly lost everything, and who had those psychological frameworks intact often rebuild. The money comes back because the patterns that generate and sustain wealth are still operating. The architect wrote one more thing in that journal that I want to leave you with. It was near the very end, written almost as an afterthought, like he was talking to himself more than writing for any audience. He wrote, "The day I stopped trying to figure out how to make more money and started focusing on becoming someone who handles money well, that was the day everything quietly began to change." Look, I want to be real with you for a second. You've been watching this video, and which means you're already thinking differently about money than most people around you. Most people never ask these questions. Most people drift through their financial lives on autopilot, wondering why they're not further ahead, never stopping to examine the invisible habits that are driving the outcome. You stopped. You asked. That matters. So here's what I want you to do. Not all 7 habits. Not a complete life overhaul. One thing. Pick one habit from this video, just one, and commit to doing it for the next 14 days. Just 14 days. If you want to start with the easiest one, the Morning Financial Minute. 30 seconds to 2 minutes every morning looking at your balance. That's it. No action required. Just look. If you want the most impactful one, the uncomfortable savings percentage. Look at what you're currently saving automatically. Bump it up by 5%. Set the transfer. See what happens. And if you want to start with the most transformative one, find one person, one trusted person in your life, and have an honest financial conversation with them. Tell them where you actually are. Ask them where they actually are. I promise you that one conversation will do more for your financial life than any budgeting app ever will. Because here's the thing. Financial literacy isn't really about knowing more information. You already know you should save more. You already know you should spend less on things you don't need. The information has never been the problem. The problem, and the solution, is in the habits. In the unconscious patterns you run every day without ever examining them. That's what the architect understood. That's what 30 days of copying his system taught me. And that's what I hope this video started to unlock for you. If you found value in this, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who need this information. Subscribe if you want more videos that go this deep on the psychology and mathematics of building real financial security. And drop a comment below. Which of these 7 habits are you going to start first? I read every single one, and I'll respond to as many as I can. See you in the next one.